Excited about this series, but honestly, it makes me a little afraid. Haha. Sorry, that was cheesy. Let's go ahead and pray before we get into this. So, Father God, we thank you so much just for the beautiful weather you are bringing our way. God, we thank you so much for this building that we are able to come into and just openly worship you. That we don't have to fear for our lives when we come and worship you, that we can profess you wherever we go. And God, that is a blessing from you. So God, I just pray that as we just go into this message, that it be spoken from you, that it be your words that we hear, that you prepare our hearts to receive them, that whatever is going on outside, be it stress, be it fear, be it anything, God, that we be able to set it aside and just solely focus on you. We love you so much, and it's in your name I pray. Amen. So obviously the question is going to be asked at the beginning of this. What is your biggest fear? And, you know, everybody has fears, and you can take this as literal, physical, or you can take it as some intangible fear. So, you know, literal fears, or rational fears as I call them, might be like snakes, spiders, chewed gum, heights, the dark, crowded spaces, and the such. And yes, chewed gum is a real fear. There are people out there who hate it, so don't bring it near them. Then you have your irrational fears, and I actually looked up the most weirdest irrational fears, and this is according to healthtopia.com. And I've never even heard of these, but one of them is called venostrophobia, which is the fear of beautiful women. You have omphalophobia, which is the fear of belly buttons, be it your own or somebody else's. They just freak out. Chromatophobia is actually the fear of money, and these people like to spend it as soon as they get it so they don't have it anymore. Papaphobia is the fear of the Pope. Nomophobia is the fear of being without a cell phone, and that is becoming more and more prevalent in society. All right, I threw this one up on the screen. It's hippopotamoquipdaliophobia. I have said that one over and over and over in my head so I don't mess it up. Fear of long words. You're going to overcome it by saying what it is. So I have that. Then you have sinistrophobia, which is the fear of the left or the right side. You have euphobia, which is the fear of good news. That's got to be depressing. You have orophobia, which is the fear of finding gold. I don't have that. I want to find gold. You have phobophobia, which is the fear of phobias. And so I got to thinking, man, these are kind of out there. So I decided to ask my friends what their fears are. And so I got on, the great Facebook, and I asked people what their biggest fears are if they were brave enough. And a couple of the ones that made me laugh and some of the ones that I could relate to is, man, I got to lead off with this one too. Proposing and the person saying no in public. That was somebody's fear. Public restrooms. That's my fear. Water, the fear of failure. My uncle said he's scared because he's related to me. He's hilarious. Some people said clowns. One person said skunks. And then, obviously, the fear of not measuring up. But the thing is, everybody has fears. Whether rational or irrational, it is a part of life. Fear is going to creep into our lives. Even in this room, we would probably come up with hundreds of different fears that everybody has. Some of them, again, rational, some of them physical, some of them the fear of failure or the fear of things that we can't really touch. For example, my fear is the fear of failure or the fear of measuring up. That one is with me constantly, and I'm constantly trying to answer my own question of, do I have what it takes? Am I capable of it? Am I able to answer this call that God is putting on my life, whatever it be? And it's a scary thing. Parents, if you have teenage drivers, you know what fear is every day you get in a car with them. So fear is a thing. And back in 2001, they came out with a TV show. It was a game show called Fear Factor. And the show, it was a contest in which the contestants would try and overcome fears to win a great amount of money. And so they had to do things from being in a coffin that was filled with snakes, and they would be handcuffed, have to find the key, and then unlock themselves and get out. which freaks me out talking about it. I don't like snakes and then being covered in them. So they might also have to do something from great heights in which they are dangling and they have to overcome a fear of heights. Or the most disgusting times were whenever they had to eat something. And so like they would eat live insects, or they would eat body parts of an animal that are not supposed to be eaten by any human being. And it's a very disturbing show, but what it does is it shows that there is fear. And then it also shows that some people will go to great lengths to overcome these fears. Money is a driving factor for these people, that they will do almost whatever it takes to overcome to get that money. There are other people, though, who overcome fear for different reasons. Looking at the Navy SEALs or the Coast Guards, the people who serve in those areas have to overcome a fear of drowning because people's lives depend on it. They have to be willing to give up their own life. Even death cannot be something that they are afraid of. And they go through this test called drown proofing. And what is required is their hands are tied behind their backs, their feet are bound together, and for 30 minutes they have to bob up and down doing various tasks. And I would fail right there. But this helps them overcome that fear of drowning. And then the Coast Guard, who deals with horrible weather, what they have to do is they get in a pool that will actually simulate a Category 1 hurricane. Because you don't want a Coast Guard member to jump in a hurricane and have no idea what to do. And so they have to be able to overcome that fear. And all this helps them focus on the motive of what they're doing. And if their motive is not big enough, they're going to end up dropping out and they're going to end up quitting. And in our passage today, we're actually going to see that this is the case that happens. We're in Matthew chapter 14, if you want to flip over there, and it'll be on the screens. And we're actually going to see that fear overcame Peter. And this is the all-familiar passage of Peter walking on the water. And it's found in Matthew chapter 14, starting at 22. And we're going to go all the way through verse 33. So if you would rise as we read today's passage. And it says, immediately Jesus, better read the right version that's on the screen. Immediately he, Jesus, made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on a mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but the boat by this time was a long way from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It's a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." And Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, being Jesus, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." You may be seated. So I want to look at this passage because I believe that sometimes when we really think about it, there are interesting points to consider. So I just kind of want to break down this passage real quick. And what has happened right before this is Jesus has fed 5,000 men, plus however many women, that's unknown. And he sends his disciples away while he goes up to pray. Because what has really happened is Jesus has just got news that John the Baptist has been beheaded. And so he tries to go off on his own, and then 5,000 men plus women follow him. And so he feeds them, he tends to their needs first, he gets them taken care of, and now he sends the disciples off while he can go be alone with his Father. And the story is actually found in two other Gospels. It's found in Mark and John, and in their accounts, we see that the disciples aren't making very good progress. This great storm has popped up on them out of nowhere, and they are struggling against it. It actually says that it's in the fourth watch, which is the time between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. And so if we look at this, if they left before it was dark, so imagine that it gets dark at 7 o'clock, And here by the fourth watch, they're not very far away, which is, say it's 3 a.m. They have been struggling for over 8 hours and still not making a lot of progress. So this storm is violent. It is pushing them back. So here they've been rowing and not getting anywhere. And then Jesus comes walking by. And it's pitch black in the middle of the night. It's without ambient light. But yet they see Jesus. They see this figure walking on the water, and their thoughts go automatically to where my thoughts would go. What is that? Is it a ghost? What are my eyes seeing? And I find it interesting because in Mark's account, this is found in Mark chapter 6, Mark actually says that Jesus meant to pass them by. And it's like, why would Jesus mean to walk by the disciples who are struggling? But this is peculiar because Jesus goes past them, but we see that actually what this is doing is showing how divine Jesus is, that he is actually God. Because a few chapters prior to this in Mark 4:41, Jesus, he calms the storm. And then after he does that, the disciples are astonished. And they actually question, who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him? And so again, this is one of those times where Jesus is trying to teach the disciples who he really is. Because all of these disciples, they knew the Old Testament. They would have been studied in it some. And so they had more than likely memorized the first 5 books of the Bible, which would have involved Exodus. And so they would have recounted in Exodus 3, in which Moses asked God to show his glory to him by passing by. And so they would have remembered that God passed by Moses as Jesus is now passing by the disciples. And then they also would have remembered in Job chapter 9, in verse 8, it says that God trampled the waves and the sea. And so if this isn't enough, when they cry out, if it is God or if it is Jesus, they would have remembered his response when he responds and says, "It is I, do not be afraid." Because again, going back to Exodus, this phrase, "it is I," can literally be translated, "I am." In which we see when Moses is questioning God, who do I say sends me when they ask? God responds in Exodus 3:14 and says, "I am who I am. Tell them that I am has sent you." And so Jesus, time and time again, is giving the disciples an example that he is God. He's showing them exactly who he is. And now I don't know if Peter realized it immediately or not, but my belief is that he is starting to grasp who Jesus is more and more every day. We already see that when Peter was called to follow Jesus, he fell down at Jesus' feet and said, "Depart from me, for I am a sinner." So he's already got a little idea, and then he's been hearing Jesus preach, and he's been hearing the teachings of Jesus. He's seen the miraculous catch. He's seen Jesus feed 5,000 people. He's seen Jesus calm a storm. And so I think Peter's starting to realize Jesus is God. Like he is amazing. And so often we get caught up in this story with the fact that Peter is overcome by fear. But I want to see first that Peter is actually overcome by faith when he sees who Jesus is. Because his immediate response is, "Lord, if it is you, call me out onto the water with you." And so he experiences something that nobody else in the history has ever experienced. He steps out on water as if it is solid ground. And I believe that Peter is so confident in what Jesus is going to do that he doesn't even test the water. You know, a lot of times when you're getting in a pool, you kind of like touch it to feel how cold it is. And I feel like Peter just confidently jumps out of that water, lands on solid ground, and knows that it is going to support him because his faith is in Jesus. And he knows what Jesus is capable of. And so he steps out of the water and he steps out of the boat and he starts walking on the water because he knows that his power comes from Jesus. And so it leads me to question, are we confident like Peter in the power that we can have through Jesus? Are we confident in the power that we can possess like Peter was? Not because of who we are, but because of who Jesus is in us. Or are we like the other disciples who aren't so confident in that we're going to stay in the boat? And we're just going to continue and float, and we're going to continue and drift along with life. Because notice, Peter is the one who is remembered for stepping out of the boat. Peter is the one who is remembered for walking on water. And so the question is, are we allowing the initial fear to hold us back from experiencing the true power that God has for us? Are we going to step out of the boat? Now, Peter is known for losing his faith and losing sight, and fear begins to creep in. And so this is how it plays out in my mind. Peter, he jumps out of the boat. He's real confident. He's walking. He's looking at Jesus. And then he starts to look at his surroundings, because there is still this storm going on. He starts seeing, maybe he remembers actually first that, wait a minute, this is water I'm on. How am I walking on this? And so he starts to look around, and the number one thing when you're dealing with heights is don't look down. Apparently the number one thing when dealing with walking on water, don't look down. Don't look around. But he's walking, and he starts to look around. And then he sees the storm. And he sees that he's on water, and he's not supposed to be on water, and he loses focus. And so he starts to sink. And whatever reason it is, his eyes come off of Jesus, and the waves begin to crash over him. And he begins to fear for his life, and so in desperation, he shouts out to Jesus, "Lord, save me. I need your help." And we see that Jesus does what Jesus always does. He reaches out his hand, he grabs Peter by the arm, and he pulls him up, and they go back to the boat. And I wonder what would have happened if Peter would have always kept his eyes on Jesus. What if he wouldn't have looked around at the storm, but he could have fixed his eyes on Jesus the entire time? What if fear never crept into his life? Would he have yelled back at the guys in the boat, "You guys just go ahead, get to the shore. Me and Jesus, we're walking this thing. We're on the water"? Would he have been known solely as the man that walked on water? Maybe he would have walked on water all the time because he knew who Jesus was in him. But instead, he lets the circumstances get the best of him. Life happens, and he realizes what's going on around him, and it keeps him from being able to stay afloat. And the same can be said for the disciples in the boat. They look around and they see the storms of life in our metaphorical boat now, and they're like, "I'm not stepping out of my comfort zone. I'm going to stay right where I am because this is what I like. This is what I know. This is safer than stepping out on water that nobody else has ever walked on before." So do we stay in the boat, or do we look at Jesus and we say, "I see the storm that is going on. Yeah, it's a little scary. I see it. But I also see my Savior. I see Jesus, who is far more powerful than this storm that I'm going through. And it's because of that I'm going to walk towards him. I'm not going to stay in my boat. I'm going to get out, and I'm going to pursue him wherever he is calling me, even if that is beyond the comfort of a boat." And so my question now is, in what area of our lives are we allowing fear to drive out our faith? And that's a different answer for each person. But where are you letting the fear of the unknown, or the fear of the difficulty, or the fear of the uncomfortable drive out your faith in God? That you're like, "I cannot step out there." Not in that place. And for me, a lot of times, it's in comfort. I'm more like the disciples that are staying in the boat. Comfort keeps me here. It might not be great, but it's better than what I don't know out there. And honestly, nobody really likes to be comfortable. It's unnerving, and it just kind of stresses us out. But what if the thing outside of our comfort zone is the very thing that God is calling us to? What if the thing that he is saying, step out, is actually going to be the best thing for us in the long run? Because if Peter could have kept walking on the water, he was knowing that God is that powerful, that Jesus is so good. And so what if God has amazing things in store for us? So amazing that it's walking on water, which nobody has ever done before. But instead, we stay in our boat. We don't follow him because we're scared or because we're so comfortable where we're at. You look at Mother Teresa. She's an example of this. She wasn't born in poverty like she went to, But she said, I see a people that are hurting. I see a people that need the hand of God to touch them. And I'm going to be that hand. I'm going to give up my possessions. I'm going to give up my comfort. And I'm going to go to the lowest people. And I'm going to care for them. And I'm going to step out of my comfort zone. But the greatest example of this is Jesus, obviously, who had so much comfort in heaven, but he left it. He took on pain. He took on loneliness. He took on sickness. He took on hunger. He took on death, all for us. He said, I'm going to leave the comforts of heaven. The earth was my footstool, but I'm actually going to go there, and I'm going to serve these people. And so what if Jesus would have been like, man, I like it up here. I'm not going to go, actually. I'll stay. They can take care of themselves. They'll struggle, but I feel pretty good where I'm at, so I'm going to stay here. Thank God Jesus did not do that. But he said, I will leave and I will go to my people, and I will take their form and be with them. So where is it that God is leading you to step out of your comfort zone and follow him? Where are you feeling that tugging, that it's like, God, it's scary. I don't want to. I like it here where I'm safe, where I'm comfortable. But God's saying, come follow me. I have greater things in store for you. Where is it that God's asking you to step out of your comfort zone and follow him? Maybe it's not comfort. Maybe it's actually, like a lot of people, the fear of failure. Nobody likes to fail. Just watch sports. Everybody hates to lose, and we view failure as losing. And we don't want to be like Peter, who actually is more known for not walking on water, but for sinking possibly. Everybody thinks of his doubt and his fear, and so he's known as a failure. And it's funny because this story is recorded in Matthew, Mark, and John. But if you read all three of the accounts, Matthew's the only one that actually recalls that Peter walked on water. And Mark is actually considered to be like the first-hand account of Peter. Like Mark was walking around writing the accounts of Peter as Peter directed it to him. And so it's almost like Mark is writing this part when Jesus is walking on the water. And then he gets ready to write, and Peter walks on the water. And it's almost like Peter's like, wait, I sank. Let's not add that part. Nobody likes to have our worst moments recorded. And I don't know if that is. That's how it plays out in my mind. But so we don't see it in Mark. But the thing is that Peter's failures have stuck with him. That we remember him lopping off the guy's ear. We remember him denying that Jesus is going to die. We remember him sinking in the water and so many other times. But notice he never lets failure stop him from moving forward. He keeps going. He keeps pressing on. Failure is very much a driving factor. But our failures don't define who we are. Your failures don't define you. They can be the very things that we learn from and when we grow from. I wonder if Peter had another opportunity to walk on the water in a storm, if he'd be like, all right, I know who I'm looking at through it all. Jesus is my focus. I'm going to keep my eyes on him. But fear or failure is a fear that I have. I don't want to fail. I don't want to mess up in life. But we don't focus on that. Because we focus on Jesus. Because again, he is far greater. Because even though Peter failed, notice Jesus' response to him. Jesus doesn't walk by him on the water and just shake his head and say, man, you failed. Just stay down there. Swim back to the boat. That's it. But instead, he reaches out to Peter and he picks him up and he helps him continue on. Because I want to notice something. I've read this multiple times and it just kind of hit me this week. In order for Peter to return back to the boat, he walked on the water again. He had to walk on the water with Jesus again. So Jesus takes him by the hand and they continue to do the impossible. He continued to walk on the water with Jesus. And this is how it is with us. Even if we fail, which is possibly going to happen, but even if we fail, Jesus is there to pick us up, take us by the hand, and then we continue on to do what seems impossible. But again, it is only with Jesus and through Jesus. And so we have the choice to stay sinking, or we can actually cry out to Jesus and say, Jesus, we need you. Help us through this. Help us in this area of life. Because going back to my initial fear of not being qualified and not measuring up, the truth is, yeah, I'm not qualified for I don't really feel like I'm qualified for a lot. But through Jesus, we can do it. Through Jesus, I am capable. Because it's not my power. It's not your power that's going to get you through it. It's the power of Jesus inside of you. It's his strength running through you. And so my question is, where is fear holding us back? Where is fear holding us back as individuals? In individual areas of your life where God is calling you to so much more, and you're just like, I can't do it. And all it takes is stepping out of the boat in faith and walking towards God. And then where is fear holding us back in other areas of our life? As a church, as organizations, as a country, wherever it is that you individually can step out and help, where is fear holding you back? And I encourage you and I challenge you, step out in faith. See where it is that God is calling you. Take that step of faith and keep your eyes focused on him through it all. Because it's through him and him alone that we can conquer. It's through him and him alone that we can get through these failures. So who are we going to fix our eyes on? Who are we going to fix our eyes on? Are we going to look to Jesus, or are we going to look at the waves of life that are crashing over us? Let us step out of the boat and follow Jesus wherever he calls. And maybe today, for some of you in here, you haven't given your life to Jesus, and he's actually calling you to take those steps towards him. He's actually saying, I want you to come to me, and you're saying, man, that is a scary thing, and honestly, that first step is very scary. I mean, you might have to stand up and walk in front of a lot of people. That could be scary. Or you might be realizing, if I make this decision, life is not my own anymore. There are big things that I'm being called to. So where is it that God's calling you? If he is calling you to him today, and you have not responded, now's the time. Step out of the boat and walk towards Jesus. And so Tom, he's going to come up and he's going to lead us in a song. And if you have that decision to make, if you feel the call on your life and you're like, it's too big, I'm not ready, maybe now's the time. Peter wasn't ready to walk on water, but he stepped out in faith and he did it because it was Jesus guiding him. If you have that decision, Tom's going to lead us in a song, and I encourage you to come forward. There's no time like the present. Let us sing.